Okay, so this is obviously here the story of Aeneas, the greatest Roman hero and founder of the Latin race. And it is an offshoot of the Trojan War because that is where Aeneas is from. And so the Romans themselves saw their origins ultimately in the Trojan War. And so it holds sway, does it, over two civilizations, that being the civilization of Greece and then obviously Rome that grew up and essentially subsumed all of Greece in and of itself. So let's go ahead and get to the story. Around 1200 BC, as we all know, there was, according to Homer and other sources, the Trojan War that lasts between the Greeks, of course located here, against Troy on the Hellespont, which is there. There you can see some of the major places. You have Ithaca of Odysseus, Pylos of Nestor, Sparta of Menelaus, Mycenae is located right here, and then Troy up there. And so after 10 years of the war, we all know that the results of the Iliad, and then even the items post-Iliad, that there is a trick that is devised to get inside the walls finally. And it was devised and thought up by Ulysses. In Latin, we call very many of these Roman, or I should say Greek heroes, by a different name. And so whereas in Greek, it would be Odysseus. The Romans called him Ulysses. Its equivalency would be kind of like if your name is Joseph in English, you might be Yusef in another language or Jose in another language. And so it's just a different form of the name. And thus they then leave the Trojan horse down on the beach. Meanwhile, they are all going to escape to an island, or hide, I should say, to an island, Tenedos, leaving only a few men in the belly of the beast in the hopes that the Trojans will bring it inside their city walls. Now, of course, they have to be convinced, because when they leave out from their walls, go down to the beach, see that all of the Greeks are gone, they then see the ginormous horse, and immediately the talk was what to do with it, and the plan would maybe be to destroy it. Well, the Greeks, knowing that that might happen, left behind a spy named Sinon, and he claimed that the Greeks had abandoned him, that he had gotten into an argument, particularly with Ulysses. And the reason why we're using Roman names here is because the story as told to us about Aeneas and what is happening here is that of a Roman poet. It's the Aeneid, the great Roman epic, so we will use all Roman names for both the gods and for the characters if they are different. Many times they are not. Nevertheless, Sinon then tells to them that the reason why there is a horse is because they wanted to appease the goddess Athena, or Minerva in this instance, and that they made it so big, in fact, that it would prevent the Trojans from being able to bring it into their city, whereupon Minerva would favor them. Immediately, all the Trojans say, well, let's bring it in. And they, of course, accept and welcome in Sinon, as he has been abandoned. Laocoon, this is a famous statue you can find in the Vatican. It's one of my favorites from antiquity, if not the favorite. Comes running down. He is a priest of Neptune, and he warns to the Trojans, do not bring this in, and quote directly from the Aeneid, beware the Greeks even bringing gifts. And he then throws a spear into the belly of the beast, and when it struck, it was a hollow sound. And so there were all these clues to the Trojans that maybe this thing is no good, but they still were blind with their madness, and they then see what happens. In that, two huge serpents come emerging from the sea and pass by all sorts of people closer to the water and make a beeline towards Laocoon and devour both Laocoon and his two young sons alive, and then immediately head up to the temple of Minerva, and they coil underneath the statue of Minerva and just simply wait there, watching over all of the people. Immediately, everybody says, Laocoon bad-mouthed statue, snakes came out of the ocean, ate Laocoon, and now they're hanging out at Minerva's statue. Let's bring in the horse. And that's exactly what they do. And they have an absolute raging party all night. 10-year war finally to an end. They got this real cool statue. They are drinking, they are partying, they are screaming to the heavens, and they, of course, many of them fall into a deep sleep, overcome by wine late at night. Meanwhile, the people who were left here are let out by Sinon, and then they rush to the gates. And when they rush to the gates, they then are going to open up And there on the outside are all the Greeks having returned from the island of Tenedos, and thus the raging absolute destruction of the city will begin, murdering people in their beds, setting fire, pillaging, raping, plundering. It's just a horrible, horrible thing. It is truly a Trojan Holocaust. And it is at this point where we first meet our hero, Aeneas. He is asleep and he is awakened by the ghost of Hector. He springs to his feet to go and defend his city. Aeneas immediately runs towards the great palace where Priam is located, and from another vantage point, a building across, he sees into the palace, and there he witnesses the brutal murder of Priam, who is killed by Achilles' own son. Achilles, at this point in the story, is already dead himself, but his son Pyrrhus, also known as Neoptolemus, murders the son of Priam named Polites, and then murders Priam himself, dragging Priam by the head of his hair, slipping the blood of his own son to an altar, and essentially makes Priam a sacrifice. A horrific scene, at which point Aeneas then thinks, oh my lord, what about my own old father? Whoa, what about my own wife? What about my child, Ascanius, the son? And thus is going to run off and see if he can find them at his house. Now, in the way that he is there, he sees Helen, and in a moment of weakness, he thinks, I'm going to kill this woman, the one that was the problem, the one that is the cause of this whole war, the one that now I see is the cause of the destruction of my great city. But his mother, Venus, comes down and prevents him from doing so and tells him he needs to go check on his family. And so therefore, when he sees his family safe and sound, he says, we must escape from the city, we must go. And he says to his son, get ready and let's go. To his wife, Creusa, get ready and let's go. But Anchises refuses. He will not flee. He says, I'm too old. I will hold you back. I will be too slow. I cannot do it. Leave me to perish with the city. And he refuses until finally a sign from the gods, an omen, comes and convinces him to leave, which is Ascanius, the son's hair catches on fire. And in that sign, they all agree to go. And so he grabs his son by the hand, he yells to his wife Creusa to follow, and he puts his own father on his back. Such an absolute example of pietas, this dedication that one has to one's gods, to one's family, and to one's country. And we see it in Aeneas every step of the way. Anchises, his father, on the back, Ascanius holding him by the hand, and Creusa trailing behind. They flee the city. The little hand that you see here is going to be that of Ascanius holding the sacred flame of Troy. His father holds the Lares and the Penates, the household gods, and they are obviously to leave the city. The scene of the fleeing with Aeneas and his wife, Creusa, is very popular in art, and here we're going to see that you have little Ascanius, you have Anchises on the back, and Creusa trailing behind. Continuing, still fleeing again, little Ascanius, Anchises on his back, Creusa trailing behind, till finally they get outside of the city. There is a roll call. Aeneas, where are you at, my father? Anchises says, I am here. Of course, Ascanius says, I am here, but Creusa is not to be found. And so, instead of ditching it like a bad habit, thinking, oh, I can get another wife, I can upgrade, he instead, filled with pietas, is going to rush back into the city, back into the terrible perils of the burning and the murdering and the pillaging and the plundering and raping and all that sort of thing. And he does not find his wife, but instead finds her ghost. And so she has been killed, unfortunately, left behind in the melee, and tells to Aeneas, go on without me, take our common son, you have a destiny. Your destiny is to found a new Troy. And he says, where is this new Troy? She says, you must go found a new Troy. He's like, yep, yeah, sounds good. Where is it at? You must found a new Troy. He says, okay. He heads off, grabs his young son, and then sets sail. Now, this then becomes the wanderings. He gets some companions, sets out with 20 ships, and stops in several locations. Stops in Thrace, stops in Delos, stops in Crete, stops in Buthrotum, stops in Sicily, where he is aided by the king that is there, named Acestes. And finally, they're on their way. Now this right here, right off of the coast of Sicily, is where the Aeneid, the great epic poem of Virgil, the great national epic Roman poem, is going to begin. And he, of course, is going to encounter a horrible time, because all along the way, the one figure that is preventing him in his travelings rather Odyssean, just like in the Odyssey, and that is intentional. Books 1 through 6 of the Aeneid is the Odysseus section, the Odyssey section, whereas when they finally get to, of course, Italy, that is the Iliadic or Iliad section of the Aeneid, books 7 through 12. But nevertheless, the entity that is preventing him, just like it was Poseidon giving Odysseus such a hard time, here it is the goddess Juno, the Roman name of Hera, and she doesn't like it because she loves the city of northern Africa, Carthage, more than any other. And because she loves that city, she knows that if he is successful, if he is to get to Latium one day, if he is to establish the Latin people, and then hundreds of years later they will found the city of Rome, and Rome will grow into its empire, that there will be a series of 3 wars, the Punic Wars against Carthage, and thus Carthage is to be destroyed. So all that I've just told you about the fall of Troy, and all that I told you about the wanderings here, are in books 2 and 3 of the Aeneid, because book 1 starts right here, and when he eventually gets to Carthage, and he then tells the story. And books 2 and 3 is Aeneas telling the story of what had happened in Troy, book 2, and then the wanderings are book 3. And then eventually, book 4, it catches back up to real time with Aeneas being in Carthage. And so, as we just said, the person who is singing this song is Publius Vergilius Maro, Virgil. And when Rome switched over from res publica, and one man gained so much power by putting to an end finally all of the civil wars and that century of higgledy and piggledy, his name, Augustus, originally Octavian, wants someone to write this national Roman epic, and Virgil is the one who is chosen to compose it. And 12 books of absolute literary masterpiece is then going to tell this story as he chooses a somewhat obscure, little-known heroic figure from the Trojan War, linking, therefore, Rome's history and heritage to that of Greece and of the great tradition of epic poems with, of course, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And here we know that Aeneas is now being thwarted on all sides by Juno, and it is indeed her fear of what will come to be should he be successful. And thus, we catch up with the story in now book 1 of the Aeneid, and I will tell that one in another section of